se pode falar em sexo sem falar em Hugh Hefner, o fundador da revista Playboy. Nos últimos 40 anos, ele ajudou a criar fantasias sexuais de milhões de pessoas no mundo todo. E ele pessoalmente viveu todas essas fantasias, fazendo de sua vida uma sucessão de festas com celebridades, de orgias com as mulheres mais lindas do mundo, ou no seu avião particular, ou no castelo onde ele vive com sua famosa cama redonda eletrônica. Ele criou um império com clubes e cassinos que foi tumultuado por drogas, suicídio, assassinato e falência. Depois dessa vida intensa, o que Hugh Hefner quer agora é a paz do seu casamento e o prazer de cuidar de seus filhos. Com vocês, Hugh Hefner, o inventor do marketing do sexo e de uma vida de sonhos. How did you get the idea of working with sex?
Well, I think most things come from childhood, and in my case, that's very, very clear. I was raised in a very typically American, very repressed home, very Puritan home, and I think that early on, I saw the hurt in repression, and I think that romantic love became the equivalent of all forms of love for me. I saw a magic world in the movies and in the music from the 30s when I was growing up.
But did you feel a lack of naked girls in some magazine? You said, I'm going to work with this.
No, I don't think I thought of it in those kind of terms. I don't think, there were no pictures of naked girls back then. I mean, if there were, I never saw them. But I think that there was a kind of a romantic magic in the movies from the 1930s and early 40s. And another world out there that was not reflected in my home. And I think that Esquire had a significant influence on me also. I saw copies of Esquire which were not allowed in my home, in the home of a girl that I had a crush on when I was in 8th grade in grammar school. And it had, some of the elements in it that Playboy has now. In other words, it had cartoons in it, it had pin-up pictures, and all of those disappeared from Esquire after the war. And most of the men's magazines after the war were outdoor adventure magazines. And I wanted to create a magazine that was more sophisticated and concerned with not the great outdoors, but the great indoors.
And put everything together.
Yeah.
And what was your aim? Millions of dollars or millions of girls?
No, to begin with, it was a very simple dream. The notion was to create a magazine that I would enjoy as a reader and hope that it would be successful enough so there'd be another issue. See, when I started the magazine, I didn't have any money. I had no money.
At all?
At all.
You remember how much did you pay?
Yes. The total, there was a point in the summer of 1953 in which I had less than $200 in my bank account. I managed to borrow $1,000 from my parents, got another $1,000 from another friend, and the total investment was a little over $5,000. Now, you can't start a magazine with that kind of money, but...
but you did.
I did.
Playboy is a 40-years-old magazine.
Almost.
What is still a sex taboo for Playboy?
Oh, there are lots of things. I don't think Playboy... I have never attempted with the magazine to push the outer limits of what is acceptable in sex. What I tried to do, quite frankly, is to create a mainstream magazine that would make sex clean and acceptable. So the kinkier or more bizarre aspects of sex have never really been what Playboy was all about. The concept behind the magazine was to try to, in a very repressive society, try to say that sex is okay. Nice girls like sex too. Sex is a good part of life.
It can be clean.
It can be clean.
And do you still believe that people are afraid of their own sexuality?
I think that the major problem is that people are afraid of their own sexuality. I think that Western civilization, and America in particular, is very schizophrenic about their own sex.
Why?
And they are fascinated with it on the one hand, and on the other hand, they feel guilty about it. It's I think, a part of our tradition. It comes from our Judeo-Christian heritage. It was reinforced during the Victorian era in the latter part of the 19th century. And I think that always in America we have been kind of pulled in two ways related to sex. On the one hand, there were the founding fathers who wanted to separate church and state, but the Pilgrims were Puritans, and so that's part of our psyche.
Talking about Puritans, some of them accused you to do a dirty magazine.
Mm-hmm.
What is dirty in the American society? What is it?
Well, I think that what is really dirty in American society is violence. I don't think that I think sex is, quite frankly, the good part of who we are. Sex is properly understood, is the attraction between men and women. And it is the beginning of family and civilization. And as many conflicts and hurts as there are in this world, if there were only one sex, it would really be a very cold and unhappy place. But we continually, particularly in the last few years, try to make ourselves feel guilty about perceiving one another as sexual objects. Well, we are sexual objects, or should be. That is one of the unique things about being a mammal, the need to touch and to hug.
And why do you think in their mind they consider it dirty?
Because I think that's the way they've been raised. I think it's because of their own fears of their own sexuality and the conflicts that are there in our heritage.
And
I was raised in the same way. I was raised in a very Puritan home, a very traditional home. And I saw the hypocrisy and the hurt in it.
But you thought about this and you said, no more.
Yes.
And they?
I've spent a lifetime, both inside my own self and also in terms of society, trying to find a better way. Yeah.
And some people accuse you of doing pornography. What is, in your opinion, the difference?
I think pornography, like beauty, is in the eye of the beholder. It is what a person projects into it. If you can see something, pornography, after all, is just a dirty label for images related to sex. And if you see something ugly in the human body, or even in the sex act itself, I think that says a great deal about you and is a very sad perception of sexuality.
What are the limits in the nude photos?
Well, I think Playboy has very real limits. In other words, there are lots of things that we won't do in the magazine because, as I said, we're trying to give sex a good name. I think that the things that people respond to and that they call pornography are very subjective. It's just personal opinion.
In your personal opinion?
Well, I don't like things that that relate sex to something ugly or related to violence. But anything this side of that, or things related to children or etc. But anything that makes sex attractive and makes you feel better about your own sexuality is positive, it seems to me. It's life-affirming. Because I relate sex very much to life itself. I think that the sexual drive is also a creative drive. It's certainly been true for me.
So when you mean violence, you mean those kind of pictures that connected with sadomasochism?
Yes, or rape.
You don't like this kind of stuff?
No, but I would say there's even in that area, there are sexual fantasies that are really only fantasies, and but I would say that that by and large it's S&M and rape and anything that makes sex seem ugly.
Do the pictures of your magazine turn you on?
No. I think that imagery that for me would be erotic would have to be a lot more explicit than things in Playboy.
So this is not the goal? No.
For me, the origins of the pictures in Playboy are the same kind. Are a contemporary variation on the pin-up pictures that were popular when I was growing up in World War II, and before that, the illustrations of George Petty and Vargas.
So, would you say that there is a kind of innocence in Playboy magazine?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Playboy is a magazine for it is very much related to the rite of passage from childhood through adolescence into maturity. It is a handbook for the young urban man, and it is very much, there is within it very much an innocence. I think that the very fact that we use the word boy, playboy, and the very fact that the centerfold is called a playmate, which is also a child's term, is part of a reflection of my own personality, and my personality is very much related to the boy that I was. I have never let go of the boy in me.
Yeah, your childhood, you
Yes,
keep this,
yes. It's the best of who I am. It's when I was the dreamer.
And I understand, but do you think this innocence is nowadays because of the world has changed, or it was at the beginning also?
I think that those values have always been there, have never changed. Yeah. I'm a romantic. I always have been.
You have the feminists against you, and they accuse you to sell women as objects. What do you have to say about it?
I think that is the best of who we are. We are objects of desire. I think that it is certainly not the totality of what a man or woman is, but to be attractive to the opposite sex, to be in love with life, and to be in love with individual people is the wonder of being alive.
But they say that you don't show women with brains.
We're a men's magazine. What we show is, in a very simplistic kind of way, the romantic connection between the opposite sex.
But the romantic connection can also be done by intelligence. Don't you think it could be?
Sounds very politically correct and very unrealistic and not much related to what real life is all about. You can fall in love with somebody across the room.
Yeah, but it's not exciting to have an intelligent woman in bed?
Of course, sure. But there are lots of things. Playboy, more than any other magazine, I think, in the men's field, is concerned with intellectual interests. And we have interviews, and we have articles, and we have profiles on both men and women. In no manner, shape, or form have we ever separated the mind and body. But I think that the Puritans want to separate the two. They want to suggest that if you are interested in the physical, then you somehow are demeaning the spiritual or the mental. And that's Puritanism in a new form.
Your playmates, they have always big breasts, you know.
Not always.
Is this almost always? Is a label of the magazine?
I think. Well, I do.
Is this the American dream?
I do think that there is a fascination with large-busted women in America, and that was true when I was a boy. There was a period in the 20s and 30s when you live long enough, as a matter of fact, you see how these trends and fads and fashions come and go. I mean, there was a point in time, in the Victorian era, women were very voluptuous. In the 20s, they were very thin, and women were very flat-chested. By the later 30s, the sweater girl was back in, and throughout the Second World War and thereafter, particularly in America, there's been a fascination with big-busted women. But certainly not exclusively America. You've got the Gina Lollobrigidas and the Sophia Lorens that were very, very popular worldwide.
Yes.
And they came from Italy.
You are an expert on this subject. What is, in your opinion, really sexy in a woman?
What makes a woman really sexy? Well, it is kind of magic. I think that I fell in love with my wife. I didn't realize it then, but I fell in love with my wife when I saw a Polaroid picture of her. Now, I didn't realize it, and it took, I was going with somebody else, and it took a long time, and there was the end of the other relationship had to come before there was even any indication of any interest. But in retrospect, I realized that the magic was there from the very beginning. And once we were together, once I expressed interest in her, we were deeply in love within a matter of days. Within a matter of days. And she was seeing someone else in Canada. And that ended. She moved here. Within a matter of months, I knew the unthinkable, that I really wanted to get married.
You've probably done lots of research to find out the American sexual fantasies. Mm-hmm. What are the most common ones?
Well, I would suppose probably that since Playboy is so overwhelmingly more popular than the rest of the marketplace, I suppose you probably find them in Playboy. Probably they are related to the girl next door concept of a female beauty, which is very healthy and to some extent what I found out here in California. I think that the perception of female beauty has changed since Playboy began publishing, and it is by and large what Playboy promoted from the very beginning. It is a very fresh, natural, wholesome look. And when Playboy began, the women's magazines, the fashion models in women's magazines didn't look like the kind of girls that appear in Playboy at all, but they do now. Mm. In other words, the most popular models today are the same girls who appear in Playboy.
So you have an idea what turns on the American man? Mm-hmm. Is this freshness?
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Do you think it's...
I think so, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. And what about you, after all these years, what is your personal sex fantasy?
Well, it's changed a good deal. I mean, now, the most romantic thing for me now is the fact that the Playboy Mansion, which has been known for all of the chauvinism and the hedonism of the past, is now a home with children. So that is, for me, the ultimate both irony and also most romantic thing of all.
Today we talk about safe sex. And could you have done your lifestyle in these times?
No, I don't think so, not in the same way. I think that there was a kind of magic window of opportunity between the invention of the pill, the birth control pill in 1960.
The freedom.
That set women free until the arrival of AIDS in the early 80s. So there were 2 decades, the swinging 60s and 70s, that were a magic time, not simply for me, but for a great many people. A time of innocence, and almost like Eden. And the arrival of AIDS obviously has changed that. But I also think that that too will pass, and I think that to some extent there is an element in society that would have invented AIDS if it hadn't come along, that they needed it to once again associate sex with disease and repression. And I think that there's been a lot of politicalizing of the disease and of sex, and that we live really in a very strange time now, because there is more homophobia, mm-hmm. and more censorship and more anti-sexuality going on in society today than probably at any time since the 50s. So it's a very strange time. Mm-hmm. In other words, it is amazing to me that as Playboy approaches its 40th anniversary, that we are fighting many of the same battles all over again. And it is the way of things in America. It's part of that schizophrenia.
But is this the worst period, in your opinion?
The worst time? Mm. No, I wouldn't say so. I think things are a lot worse in the 50s.
Or censorship?
Oh, censorship was much worse in the 50s.
Oh, really?
Oh, sure.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That was the McCarthy era. It was politically and sexually, it was very repressive.
Hello there. Glad you could join us this evening. I'm Hugh Hefner, editor-publisher of Playboy magazine, and your host. This is Playboy's Penthouse. Come on in and meet some of our guests.
Walking, baby, I don't mean maybe. Walking, my baby back, H-O-M-E.
One day you decided, you said, to reinvent yourself. Mm-hmm. You became Mr. Playboy. Why?
Well, I had been expressing my fantasies in the pages of the magazine, and having succeeded at that in the 1950s, I decided to start living the life. It all happened within a period of about 6 months. From the middle of 1959 to the beginning of 1960, I bought the first Playboy mansion in Chicago, started the first Playboy Club, invented the bunny, and started doing a television show. I went into show business, did a television show called Playboy's Penthouse. It was based on a party atmosphere. And that reinvention changed the whole direction of my life.
But what changed exactly? You changed your face, your lifestyle, your way to talk. Who was Mr. Playboy?
I don't think that it changed me anyway in the way I behaved, but I can also see that in the process I also picked up some props. I started smoking the pipe at that point. I started driving a Mercedes 300 SL and used that in the beginning of the television show. And to some extent I think I started smoking the pipe. So I'd have something to do with my hands while I was doing the television show.
Like to dive in the page of your own magazine.
Yes. Started living out the fantasies. Came out from behind the desk and started living out the life.
And your lifestyle is a legend. Big orgies. Tell me about this.
What can I tell you?
What was it like?
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. It was a boy's, an adolescent man's dream life. That was what was projected in the magazine, and it's the life I started to live. And I had an extended adolescence for the better part of 40 years.
But in this time, you were not so romantic. Lots of women all over. How was your relationship with all those girls?
You think that there isn't something there in the notion of many women that is not romantic? From a guy's point of view, it can be very romantic.
Really?
Yes, it's romantic adventure. It's a boy's romantic adventure, admittedly. It is to some extent an immature romantic adventure. But for a boy who was raised in a typically repressed home, it was all my dreams come true.
An orgy is a big dream.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I think that, quite frankly, if you live out those fantasies, then you are in a much better position to settle down and stay with one mate. Because I think that sexual adventure is one of the things that both sexes fantasize about. And it's certainly true for men. I can speak for men. I think the very fact that Playboy is so popular is a reflection of that. If you want to know what men have on their mind, look at Playboy magazine. That's what they have on their mind.
This is such a wonderful business that everybody said, "Oh, this man, my God, he must have affairs with all that wonderful women."
Yeah.
Was it like that?
Yes, it was like that. Only better.
Only better? Oh, please tell me something. I need details.
Well, what kind of details can I give you?
No, so you have affairs with all these wonderful women
yes.
in your life? My God. What about Marilyn Monroe?
No. As a matter of fact, she was our first playmate, and we were born in the same year, and we never met.
Oh. Do you regret this?
Oh, yes, sure. Yeah, sure.
I saw you in the movie, all the parties and the wonderful swimming pool in a castle. Oh, was it that true?
Yes, it was all true.
Wild times.
Good times. Yeah.
And was it everything allowed?
Well, there were very real rules in the sense that, and this may be difficult for people to understand, in the house in Chicago and also here, a person had to be on their good behavior or they did not come back. So that in a very real way, women were more in control here than they are outside the gates. In other words, sexual harassment was not something that existed here, never.
I see.
And at the same time, it was that security gave such a tremendous sense of freedom that the hills were alive with the sounds of pleasure.
Talking about pleasure, you have the most famous bed in the world. It's full of controls and machines. It's almost a play game.
Well, in the 60s, my life and Playboy were very much connected to James Bond. And we published the James Bond stories, and the parallels were more evident than that. And it was the fascination with gadgetry. The difference is he used the gadgetry to kill, I used the gadgetry to make love.
That's wonderful. And you still have the same bed?
I have the round bed, the rotating, vibrating round bed, but that's in storage. I still have it.
Yeah, this is a big piece. And how does it? What does it work?
Well, it had all, and it's in the documentary. It has. It originally was conceived as an editorial feature in the magazine. It had remote controls on it and had a headboard on it that was stationary and curved, and it would rotate 360 degrees so that you could turn the room into, in one direction was the fireplace, in another direction was the hi-fi,
It's
another direction was
a
television.
dream, a child
Yes.
that wants
yes,
to.
Sure.
It's exactly you.
It's a boy's life.
I
Absolutely.
understand. At a point in your life that you get sick of everything. I mean, get sick of sex. Like, you know, a boy that ate so many candies that it get tired, get sick of it.
No, never jaded.
No.
Never lost the innocent wonder of it all.
You never.
No. At the same time, here I am now with children, married. So while I don't think that I ever got sick of it, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, if I was still living the life now that I was living 10 years ago, I think that would be kind of sad. I think there's something particularly wonderful and delicious that my life has had these phases that have fulfilled me and satisfied me, and I was able to move on into something else rather than being, so that in effect I have managed to write my own life. I've managed to stay in control of my own life instead of it controlling me.
And you did it.
Yes.
And you, without being a prisoner of this lifestyle.
Or a prisoner of the things that I'd created before.
Or your own image. You
Yes.
you never felt that you were a prisoner in this image, in this never. You were.
Well, if I ever did, I changed it.
Uh-huh.
And I think that to some extent I had a mild stroke in 1985. And I used it. And I said at the time, this gives me permission to change the direction of my life. And I did.
When you worked, when you were a workaholic and you used to work 36 hours in a row, you took that drug to help, Dexedrine. And this was something that scared you also? And you said,
Well, I think it should have scared me more. I don't think that, quite frankly, back in the 60s, there was much awareness of some of the dangers of using too much, because dexedrine is an amphetamine. A lot of people used it for work. President Kennedy David Selznick. But one didn't really have any real. All I knew was that and my body was remarkably capable of throwing off whatever harmful effects might be there. And I never got caught in any of the other kinds of. I never used sleeping pills or downers. Some people get caught in. They'll take an upper to work, and then they'll take another kind of pill.
Yeah, yeah. You didn't.
No, never.
Fall in this sick.
I'd simply use it and work for as long as I could. It would give me additional energy, and then when I was tired, I'd sleep.
Very well, without any.
Because once again, because I was working for myself, I could dictate the routine of my life, so that I didn't have to be up for a meeting at any particular time. In other words, I didn't have to be at a job at a particular time, so that I had always a control over my life that maybe some other people wouldn't have.
You said also, this is a famous statement, that you couldn't be faithful to a woman, of course.
Well, I think that I don't know that it wasn't a matter of that I couldn't, because I'm being very faithful now. I think that I was married and right out of college in a very unhappy marriage. And I think the pain of that, to some extent, was responsible for why I didn't want to commit after that. But part of it was also just the opportunity that I had, a unique opportunity for a wonderful boy's adventure.
Too many choices.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And how could you choose one?
Yes, sure, that was part of it. At the same time, you also see in my life the romantic connection. In other words, I always needed a primary romantic connection.
A steady relationship.
That's right, that's right.
You are not a jealous man.
I'm a very jealous man.
And?
Yeah, and very possessive. Very old-fashioned.
Some particular points in your life. In 1974, federal agents arrested your personal assistant, Bobby Arnstein, on cocaine charges, and she killed herself.
Yes.
And her death had a great impact in your life. What was your reaction?
Well, I was devastated by it. They convicted her. We learned afterward. They convicted her on perjured evidence, and they did it because they attempted to. It was a period in which the drug enforcement agencies were very corrupt, and indeed, within a year or two after that affair, there was a complete overhauling of the DEA, and the head of the DEA was fired. But it was a very corrupt time. It was part of the end of the Nixon era, in which corruption in government was very common. I was a part of the enemies list. I was on Nixon's enemies list.
Why?
Well, because I was supporting, both in the pages of the magazine and also economically, a lot of Democrats. I was very active politically. I was also trying
Are you still active politically?
Yes, still.
Did you vote in Clinton?
Yes, but I also fund. Yes, yes. My man is in the White House now.
Oh, we're good.
Yes, I'm feeling very good about that. And it was an attempt to get me. It was an attempt to...
a conspiracy.
Yes, it was an attempt to do something to her, to get her to... And that was a kind of a typical method of operation in those days. In other words, they'd get something on somebody and try to turn them into... and that the way that they managed to get her... convict her was they got the real drug dealer in the case and gave him 15 years. Then in turn for perjuring himself and convicting her, they let him go free.
And that's why the press accused you of having a drugs empire. They put something...
Well, the press blew it into a Playboy drug scandal. And that's also understandable, because having created the fantasy empire, having plugged into so many people's imaginations, it would be very easy to understand why they would assume that drug abuse was also rampant here.
And have you ever taken drugs?
I've taken drugs over the years, sure, but not in that time frame. As a matter of fact, the only drug I'd ever used up to that point, I'd never even seen anybody use cocaine at that time.
What drugs have you taken?
Well, I went through the, the 70s period. I've used hallucinogenics, mostly related to bedroom things. Things that make love making better.
Oh, I
Grass,
see.
some mild hallucinogenics.
LSD, like?
A form of LSD, not real LSD. There's a thing called window pane.
Why did you close your clubs?
Well, I think that the time had come where, quite frankly, the clubs that were most successful were the casinos.
Mm-hmm.
And when the political climate, both here and abroad, turned conservative, we lost our licenses. Mm-hmm. We had casinos in both England and Atlantic City. And the loss of those licenses really took the real profits out of the club. The clubs had run for 25 years, and it really run their gamut. In other words, I think that their time was really related very much to the 60s and 70s, and I really felt that it was a magic time that was past, and it was time to close them, get on to other things.
You're married now, as you said, and she's beautiful, you have wonderful children. How is your relationship?
How is my relationship with my wife?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. It's easy. Are you a good husband?
No, yes, I think so. Mm-hmm.
Did you
Very devoted.
What, for instance, I can see you don't have anything that kind of womanizer that you used to be.
No.
You are not.
No.
Not anymore.
I'm very happy and very settled down. This is a monogamous relationship, and I'm very happy that way.
So you were a man who truly and really believes in love after the wildest time of... That's interesting. That's a surprising...
I remain a romantic innocent. That's who I am.
And, well, I can see, because you are living in a castle.
It's a child's life. It's a boy's life.
It's a boy's dream. It's still
Yes,
a boy's
still
dream.
a boy's dream.
And you, of course, you are very powerful and a very, very rich man. How do you like to spend your money today? What is your boy dream now?
Well, I think it's all fairly obvious. In other words, I've certainly had some very expensive toys over the years. The end of the Black Plane, and this house for me, this property, is Shangri-La. In other words, I have the equivalent of a luxurious English countryside estate in the middle of Los Angeles. I'm a block from Sunset Boulevard, but when you come through the gates, you're in a wonderland here. This is a Disneyland for adults.
That's true, I can tell you.
Yeah. And
do you have any other dream? Something else that you want to reach?
I think, no, nothing more to prove. The only dream that I have now is living the life that I'm living, raising the children, being with Kimberly, and trying to write the book. In other words, in effect, relishing the life well lived and trying to report on it in the book.
So, that's your life.
This is my life.
Thank you so much, and
My
I
pleasure.
can see you are very happy now.
Thank you. I am. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for the interview.
It's a pleasure.